Spring Break Horror Stories. Story 1. By Dylan. I don't know why I'm writing this down. Maybe because I'm still trying to make sense of it. Maybe because I need to get it out before it rots inside me like he did. Spring break was supposed to be fun. Wild, maybe. But fun. It was our last year before graduation. Me, Kyle, Brent, Jason, and Tommy. We'd been friends since freshman year, and this trip to Panama City Beach was our way of saying goodbye to the chaos before real life hit. We rented this big beach house 2 blocks from the water. It was a little rundown, white paint peeling off the walls, screen door hanging by one hinge, but it had a porch and a hot tub and enough beds for everyone. That first day, it felt perfect. Like nothing could touch us. The house came with this huge industrial cooler on wheels, like the kind you'd see at a catering event. Whoever rented the place before us must have left it. It sat on the back patio under a canopy of vines, stained a little, lid hanging open. Kyle joked we could fill it with ice and beer and never have to leave the porch. And that's exactly what we did. The days blurred. Mornings were late, afternoons were hot, and the nights were all music, drinks, and girls we'd never see again. I don't remember every night clearly, but I remember that one. The night before it happened. We had thrown a party, just us and some people we met on the beach. I drank too much. We all did. Jason passed out on a lawn chair. Tommy disappeared with some girl. I remember Kyle dancing like a maniac in the living room. Brent was with me most of the night, until I lost track of him. I think it was around 2 a.m. when I crashed on the couch, still in my swim trunks, the sound of someone throwing up faint in the background. When I woke up, the house was eerily quiet. It was around 10 a.m. sunlight streamed through the blinds, and I had the worst headache I'd ever felt. My mouth tasted like ash and tequila. I stumbled to the kitchen and poured myself water from the tap, my brain still foggy. That's when I noticed it. Kyle was sitting at the table, staring at his phone. "Have you seen Brent?" he asked, barely looking up. I blinked, tried to recall. "No, not since last night. I thought he went to bed." Kyle shook his head. "His bed's empty. I checked everywhere." We shrugged it off at first. It wasn't the first time someone had wandered off to hook up or crashed in another room. Tommy joked that Brent probably woke up early and went to the beach with some girl. But hours passed, and no texts, no calls. We tried his phone, straight to voicemail. By evening, the tension had started to creep in. His wallet was still in the house. His flip-flops were still by the door. No one had seen him. Not at the beach, not at the taco stand we always hit. Nothing. We searched the house again, top to bottom. Jason even climbed into the crawl space. I started opening random closets, half expecting him to jump out and scare me. Kyle went around the outside, pacing in circles. That night, none of us really slept. The next morning, we started putting together a plan. Tommy suggested checking the local bars. Kyle mentioned the hospital. Jason brought up the police, but something in me hesitated. Maybe it was denial. Maybe it was shame. Calling the cops meant it was real. And then, the smell. It was Jason who noticed it first. He was smoking a cigarette on the back porch, pacing in slow circles like a man trying to wear out his nerves. I was inside, scrolling aimlessly on Brent's Instagram, when I heard him call, "Guys, come out here." We followed. The sun was brutal, already high in the sky, but something felt off. Jason stood a few feet away from the cooler, squinting at it. "Do you smell that?" At first, it was faint. A sour, thick odor that seemed to linger just under the heat. Then, as we got closer, it hit us like a wall. Rot. Meat. Decay. Someone muttered, "The hell is in there?" We all looked at each other. The lid was shut. It hadn't been shut the night before. I remembered that distinctly, because Brent had used it to prop up his speaker. I walked closer, my throat tightening. My brain was screaming no, but my hand was already moving. It was heavy. Not just the lid, the whole cooler. Something was inside. The latch clicked. I opened it. The sound, it wasn't a scream. It was more like a gasp that collapsed halfway out of me. Like all the air had been sucked from my lungs. Brent was inside. Folded. His body was contorted in a way no living person could manage. Knees pressed to his chest, head tilted back, mouth slightly open like he was still trying to breathe. His skin was pale and waxy, patches of discoloration spreading across his chest and neck. One of his arms was bent behind him, broken maybe. His eyes, they were half open, glassy and dry. We all stood there, silent. No one said anything. No one moved. It was like time had stopped. I don't remember who closed the lid. I think it was Jason. His hands were shaking so badly, I thought he might drop it. Tommy backed away and vomited over the railing. Kyle sat down and stared at his feet. I walked back inside and washed my hands even though I hadn't touched him. That night, no one talked. No music. No drinking. Just silence, thick and unbearable. I lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly, replaying the night over and over in my head. How did he get in there? Why was the lid shut? We asked ourselves those questions again and again. Everyone swore they didn't touch the cooler. Kyle mentioned that he remembered seeing Brent stumbling outside around 1:30, but he thought he was just drunk and getting fresh air. Jason said he never saw him come back inside. Tommy, he was too drunk to remember anything at all. But I kept thinking about that lid. It was heavy. We had to use both hands to open it. It didn't just shut itself. Someone had to have closed it. And whoever did, never opened it again. For the next 2 days, we just stayed. Too paralyzed to leave, too scared to act. The cooler remained closed. Brent was still inside. I avoided the porch completely. Every time I walked past the sliding glass door, my stomach churned. Sometimes I thought I saw the lid twitch. I told myself it was the wind. Kyle started talking to himself in the bathroom. Jason wouldn't stop pacing. Tommy tried to pretend like nothing happened. He even made scrambled eggs one morning, but nobody touched them. The house felt haunted, not by ghosts but by guilt. The worst part? We still haven't told anyone. I know how that sounds. I know how it makes us look. But none of us could face it. The story was too insane. Too shameful. We didn't kill him, we knew we didn't, but we'd left him in there. For days. Drinking. Laughing. Living while he rotted a few feet away. I think maybe one of us did it. I don't know who. I don't want to know. Maybe it was an accident. Maybe someone, in a drunken haze, thought it would be funny. A prank. A scare. But they forgot. They forgot to open the lid again. I can't stop thinking about what it must have been like. Being locked in there. In the dark. The lid too heavy to push open from inside. Running out of air. Clawing at the walls. Dying alone. I wake up sweating now, gasping for breath like I'm the one in that box. The cooler is still there. We pushed it into the shed out back. I can't bring myself to go near it again. Every now and then, I swear I hear it shift. Or creak. Like the lid isn't fully closed anymore. Maybe someone should call the cops. Maybe someone will. But it won't be me. Story 2. By Madison. Cancun was supposed to be our escape. After months of cramming for midterms and pushing through winter on campus, this was going to be our reset. Sunday. Sand. Tequila. Me and my best friend Lily, on our first real trip alone. No parents, no dorm rules, no professors breathing down our necks. Just us, a hotel by the beach, and 7 days of freedom. It felt like a dream at first. The smell of salt water in the air, the blinding white of the sand, the constant thump of music echoing from the beach clubs. Everyone around us looked like they were living in a summer music video. Sunburned faces, messy hair, drinks in hand, strangers hugging like lifelong friends. We fell into it so easily. By day 3, we already had a routine. Sleep until noon, spend the afternoon at Playa del Fines, go back to the hotel for a nap and a shower, then hit the clubs until we couldn't feel our legs. The energy was addictive. So were the drinks. And the guys were everywhere. But that night was different. It was our 5th night, and we'd gone out to a rooftop bar called Zaza, somewhere near the hotel zone. It was Lily's idea. She had met this guy named Mateo on the beach the day before, tall, charming, maybe too charming, and he'd invited us out with his friends. I wasn't totally sold, but Lily had that look in her eyes. The one that said, "Don't ruin this for me." So I put on the blue dress she loved, the one that made my shoulders look sharper than they were, and we went. It was crowded. Packed, actually. Sweaty bodies, overpriced cocktails, music so loud it made my chest vibrate. Mateo's group was bigger than expected. For guys, 2 other girls. We stuck together at first, laughing, dancing, trading stories over shots of mezcal. But the later it got, the more scattered we became. By 1:30 a.m., I'd lost sight of Lily. I wasn't worried at first. That happened all the time. We'd split up on the dance floor, reconnect near the bar, find each other again in the bathroom. But I checked all 3, and still no sign of her. I stepped outside to breathe. My heels were killing me. The night air hit me like a slap, thick, humid, buzzing with the sounds of scooters and distant laughter. I pulled out my phone to text her. No response. After 10 minutes, she finally replied, Outside. Other side of the club. Near the taxis. I exhaled in relief and walked around the corner. There she was, waving at me from the curb, already pulling open the door of a black SUV. "Finally," she said, sliding into the back seat. "I thought I lost you." The car was unmarked. No sticker, no Uber sign. But in Cancun, that wasn't unusual. Half the ride shares didn't bother. The guy behind the wheel looked like every other driver we'd had, middle-aged, shaved head, mustache. He barely glanced at us as I got in after her and shut the door. I felt the cool air hit me as we pulled away from the curb. "Hotel Riviera, right?" I asked. No answer. "Señor?" Lily asked, leaning forward slightly. "Riviera Hotel?" Still nothing. He just drove. At first, we chalked it up to language. Maybe he didn't understand. Maybe he already had the destination in the app. But then Lily opened hers and realized she'd never confirmed the ride. She'd just seen the SUV and assumed it was ours. We looked at each other. A second of shared unease. "Hey, disculpe," I said, louder this time. "Hotel Riviera, sí." The man didn't even blink. Just kept driving, eyes fixed ahead. I felt it then. A small, sharp spike of fear in my chest. I leaned forward. "Señor, this is not the way to the hotel." Still nothing. The streets were growing quieter now. We had left the busy hotel zone behind. No more bars, no more beach shops. Just dimly lit roads and flickering street lamps. "Okay, this is weird," Lily whispered. I nodded. My hand slid into my purse, fingers closing around my phone. "No service," I said. She checked hers. "Same." I glanced out the window. We were heading down a narrow road, flanked by patches of forest and half-finished buildings. No signs. No lights. No people. Then, without warning, the driver slowed and made a sharp right onto a dirt road. "Hey, what are you doing?" I said, my voice cracking. "Stop the car." He didn't. He just drove faster. I reached for the door handle, locked. I looked at Lily. Her face had gone pale. "Open your side," I hissed. She tried. Nothing. The child lock was on. He must have activated it from the front. The SUV jolted over potholes and gravel, trees looming closer on either side. I could feel the panic rising in my throat like bile. "Please stop the car," I yelled, pounding the glass. That's when he looked at us. Just a glance in the rearview mirror. His eyes were dead. Emotionless. Like he wasn't hearing us at all. Like we weren't even people, just cargo. Lily started crying, pulling at her door, her voice shaking. Why is he doing this? What does he want? I didn't know. And that was the worst part, not knowing. I scanned the front seat. No dashcam. No phone mount. The screen on his console was blank. This wasn't a ride. This was never a ride. I reached for my phone again. No bars. I tried to open WhatsApp. It just spun and spun. Suddenly, the SUV stopped. Just like that. In the middle of the trees. He turned off the engine. Silence. Not the kind you notice, the kind you feel. I heard Lily suck in a breath. He didn't move. He just sat there. I saw his hand shift slowly toward the center console. That's when something primal took over. I launched myself across the seat and kicked at the back of his headrest. I don't know if it hurt him or startled him, but it worked. His hand froze. He turned halfway, shouting something in Spanish I couldn't understand. Lily screamed. I grabbed my metal water bottle from the floor and swung it forward as hard as I could, slamming it into the side of his head. He yelped, recoiled, hands going up to block the blows. "Kick the window," I shouted. Lily didn't even hesitate. She turned and began smashing her heels into the rear passenger window over and over again. I followed suit, slamming my bottle into the opposite side. The glass cracked, then spiderwebbed, then gave. Lily kicked once more and it shattered. She crawled halfway out, legs scrambling for grip, her dress catching on the jagged edge. I pushed from behind, shoving her through as fast as I could. She landed hard on the dirt, rolling to her feet. The driver reached for me, grabbing the back of my dress. I twisted, screamed, elbowed his arm with everything I had. I wriggled free and climbed out after her, scraping my knee on the broken glass. We ran. Branches whipped at our faces. Rocks tore at our feet. We didn't know where we were going, just away. Away from the road. Away from the car. Away from him. I don't know how long we ran. 10 minutes? 20? The trees eventually thinned. and we stumbled onto another dirt path. It led to a gated construction site. Empty. Silent. We hid behind a half-built wall. Lily was sobbing now. I held her close, trying not to make a sound, every muscle in my body trembling. The night stretched on like a slow knife. We didn't speak. We barely breathed. And then, headlights. Far away. On the other side of the site. We couldn't tell if it was him or someone else. So we stayed down. We waited. Eventually, the lights vanished. And we stayed hidden until the first signs of dawn bled through the sky. Only then did we start walking again. We followed the road, barefoot, blistered, sunburned and shaky, until we reached a gas station on the edge of town. The attendant didn't speak English, but he gave us water and let us use his Wi-Fi. We messaged the others. We didn't explain much. Just that we needed a ride. Fast. When we finally got back to the hotel, the others were furious. At us. At the driver. At themselves. Everyone had heard stories of things like that happening in Cancun. Everyone knew not to get into unmarked cars. But it was easy to forget that when you're drunk and the night is spinning and someone waves at you from the curb like they've been waiting for you. Lily wouldn't talk for 2 days. I couldn't close my eyes without seeing that rearview mirror. That one glance. Those empty eyes. We never told anyone else what happened. And we didn't go out again for the rest of the trip. I still wonder what he was reaching for in the console. A weapon? A phone? A lock? What was going to happen if we hadn't fought back? If the glass hadn't broken? If we had hesitated? And worst of all, how many other girls got in his car before us and didn't get out? Story 3. By Tyler. It started with a dare. Not a serious one, not at first. Just another dumb late-night challenge fueled by too many drinks and the kind of adrenaline that only spring break can bring. We were staying in Miami Beach for the week, me and 3 other guys I'd grown up with, Sam, Noah, and Julian. We'd been best friends since middle school. Through awkward phases, bad haircuts, and even worse decisions, we'd stayed tight. This trip was a kind of reunion. We were all at different colleges now, living in different states, and spring break was our chance to feel like kids again before adulthood really took hold. The Airbnb was a weird pick, an old Art Deco apartment building about 6 blocks from the beach. The owner lived on the bottom floor, and we had the top 2 units to ourselves. It wasn't fancy, but it had a view, a rooftop access door, and most importantly, no rules.
No curfews. No noisquen plans.
The first few nights were everything you'd expect. Clubs. Parties. Girls. Hangovers. But on the 4th night, we stayed in. We'd gone too hard the night before, and none of us had the energy to go out again. Instead, we sat around on the rooftop at 2 a.m., passing around cheap rum and making each other laugh until our stomachs hurt. That's when it started. Julian was filming everything on his phone for his Snapchat story. He'd been documenting the whole trip like it was a reality show. At some point, Sam looked at me and said, "You know what would be legendary?" I raised an eyebrow. "You climb up on that corner ledge," he pointed at the far side of the rooftop, "and get a photo standing with the skyline behind you. Shirtless. Arms up. You'd look like a damn god." I laughed it off. "I'm not trying to die on spring break." Julian grinned. "Small man. 1 second for the pic. It'd blow up." "It's not even that high," Sam added. "Plus, you've got the best balance out of all of us." I should have said no. I wish I had. But something about the way they looked at me, expectant, excited, like I had something to prove, pushed me over the edge. That, and the rum. Always the rum. So I walked across the gravel rooftop toward the ledge. It wasn't a real ledge. More like a thin concrete lip that extended beyond the last wall, maybe 6 inches wide, just enough for a foot to stand on. Below it, a straight drop, 6 stories down, to the alley where we parked our car. My heart was pounding before I even stepped up. The wind was stronger than I expected, warm but pushy, like it didn't want me there. I placed one hand against the wall for balance and slowly lifted myself up. Immediately, my stomach dropped. You never really understand how high something is until you're standing on the edge of it. The city stretched out around me in every direction. Neon lights. Passing cars. Music thumping faintly from nearby buildings. My legs wobbled. I tightened every muscle in my body. "Hold it! Hold it!" Julian shouted from behind the camera. I raised my arms like he said. One quick photo. And then I felt it, my left foot slipping slightly, grinding against gravel. I tried to compensate, shifting my weight, and that's when it happened. The ledge cracked. Just a sliver, just a sound, but I felt it in my bones. Something gave beneath the concrete. My body lurched forward, and I flailed instinctively, gripping the edge of the wall with both hands as I fell. I didn't fall far, only about a foot, before my legs slammed into the metal drainpipe that ran down the side of the building. Pain shot through my shin. I let out a sound that wasn't quite a scream, more like a gasp of survival, and I dangled there, hands gripping the rough edge, feet kicking wildly above open air. The guys rushed over. I heard Noah shout my name. Julian dropped his phone. I tried to lift myself. The wall was slick, and my arms were already trembling. I can't get up, I said. Hold on. Sam leaned over the edge, grabbing one of my wrists. It hurt, badly, but it helped. I got one elbow hooked over the lip of the roof, then the other. They pulled. I scrambled. My knee scraped the concrete. My shoe fell off. I didn't care. When I finally rolled onto the roof, all I could do was lie there, breathing, staring at the sky. None of us spoke for a long time. Eventually, Julian broke the silence. Jesus, man, are you okay? I nodded, barely. My legs were shaking. My palms were bleeding. My heart felt like it was going to explode. We're idiots, Noah muttered. We could have lost you. I didn't answer, because part of me still felt like I was dangling over that ledge. The rest of the night was quiet. We went back inside. I washed the cuts on my hands. We didn't talk about it. Julian never posted the video. The next morning, I woke up with a fever. Not high, but enough to make my head throb. My shin had swollen, bruised and tender, and the skin on my palm had started to peel. I think you twisted something, Sam said, watching me limp around the kitchen. Maybe you should get it checked out. I shook my head. It'll go away. But it didn't. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw myself falling again. Over and over. The edge, the pipe, the alley below. My hands would clench the sheets like I was still hanging from the building. At 3:17 a.m., I went back to the rooftop. I don't know why. Maybe I thought looking at it in the daylight would make it feel less terrifying. But at night, it was worse. The air was too quiet. The city felt too far away. And when I walked over to the edge, something was off. The ledge was still cracked. Wider now. A dark line running along the corner where my foot had been. A split in the concrete that hadn't been there before. And next to it, something small. Something shiny. I bent down. It was my other shoe. The one I'd been wearing that night. But I could have sworn it fell off over the side. I picked it up, staring at it. There was dirt on the sole. Not gravel, dirt. I looked around. No soil on the rooftop. No plants. No reason for dirt to be there. I turned back toward the stairwell, heart pounding again. And that's when I saw the handprint. On the inside of the stairwell door, smeared faintly across the glass. A palm. 5 fingers. Streaked across the window. I hadn't touched the glass. None of us had. I stepped closer. The print was made of something. Reddish. I told myself it was rust. Miami air was humid. Metal oxidized. But deep down, I didn't believe it. I went back to bed and didn't tell anyone. The next few days passed slowly. My fever wouldn't go away. My skin itched constantly, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, something just out of view. I stopped going to the beach. I stopped drinking. The guys noticed, but I brushed them off. Still not feeling great, I'd say. Probably just a bug. But that wasn't it. Something had changed in me. On the second to last night of our trip, I had a dream. One of those vivid ones that doesn't fade when you wake up. In it, I was back on the ledge. Standing shirtless again. But this time, there were no voices. No friends.
No camera.
Just me. And the ledge. I raised my arms, and the city disappeared. The lights blinked out. The buildings crumbled into blackness. And I stepped forward. Willingly. I didn't fall. I floated. When I woke up, my sheets were soaked with sweat. My nails had dug crescent-shaped marks into my palms. I went to the bathroom and washed my face. My reflection looked gray, like the color had drained from my skin. I splashed water again. And when I looked back up for a second, my reflection was smiling. But I wasn't. The smile disappeared before I could blink. I haven't gone back to the rooftop since. The others still talk about that night sometimes. They call it the dare. Say it like a badge of honor. Like something wild we survived. They don't know that I still dream about it. That sometimes I wake up and feel like I never climbed down. Like I'm still up there, waiting for something to push me the rest of the way. I think the ledge is getting weaker. Or maybe I am. Story 4. By Evan. I moved into that apartment for the quiet. It was supposed to be temporary, 3 months, maybe 4, just enough time to get through a freelance project I had picked up after leaving my old job. I needed isolation, a fresh start, and a place I could afford without roommates or distractions. That little studio in a sleepy complex just outside Santa Fe checked every box. The rent was low, utilities included, and most importantly, it was quiet. No kids, no parties, just retirees and the occasional grad student. The building was shaped like a U around a narrow courtyard with patches of gravel and 3 stunted trees. The walls were thin, sure, but it didn't matter because there was no one on either side of me. At least, that's what they told me when I moved in. My unit was 7B. Next to me was 7A, marked as vacant. The windows were shuttered, and the blinds were drawn tight. On the other side of my place was a supply closet, used by maintenance. The leasing agent, a soft-spoken woman named Carol, assured me I'd have all the peace I needed. And for the first couple of weeks, I did. I spent my days working from a wobbly IKEA desk by the window and my nights making frozen dinners and watching reruns on my laptop. It was lonely, but in the way I wanted. Nothing but the low hum of the fridge and the distant barking of a dog a few buildings away. Until one night, I heard it. It started as a soft thump, just one, like something falling against a wall. I paused the show I was watching and waited. Nothing. I told myself it was probably something in the supply closet. A mop falling over. A bucket shifting. I went back to watching. A few minutes later, another sound. Louder this time. A dragging noise. This time it came from the wall to my left. From 7A. I muted the laptop and leaned toward the wall. I couldn't hear anything at first, just silence. Then, a faint shuffle. Like someone walking in socks across linoleum. I frowned. The next day, I called the front office. Carol answered. "Hey," I said casually, just wondering, has someone moved into 7A? She was quiet for a second. No, 7A is still empty. Why? I hesitated. I thought I heard something last night. Sounded like footsteps. She gave a small, polite laugh. These walls are old. They creak. Sound travels weird in that courtyard. Sometimes it echoes from other units. I wanted to believe her. But that night, I heard the footsteps again. This time they were slower. Closer. Right up against the wall we shared. I put my ear to it and waited. There was a rhythm to them, like pacing. 5 steps one way, pause, 5 steps back. Back and forth. For almost an hour. I barely slept. The next morning, I walked out to the courtyard and casually passed by 7A's window. The blinds were still shut. I bent slightly, pretending to tie my shoe, and glanced toward the bottom of the door. No signs of life. No mail.
No scoof marks.
The peephole was covered from the inside. I didn't mention it again to Carol. I started working with music on during the day. I couldn't handle the silence anymore. It made every little creak sound like something intentional. I told myself I was being paranoid. That maybe I was just hearing the neighbors across the courtyard and my brain was filling in the gaps. But then, the coughing started. Late at night, usually after midnight, I'd hear it. Dry, shallow, repeated twice in a row. Always in the same pattern. Cough. Cough. Then silence. Sometimes I'd hear it as I was brushing my teeth. Sometimes when I was already in bed, lights off. But always from the wall next to me. From 7A. I tried knocking on the wall once. Just to see. 3 soft taps. No response. But 2 minutes later. Cough. Cough. I stopped sleeping. One night, around 2 a.m., I was lying on my back, staring at the ceiling, when I heard a different sound. A scrape. Like wood dragging against concrete. It wasn't fast. It wasn't loud. But it was deliberate. I sat up in bed, heart already racing. I crept over to the wall and leaned close. Then I heard it, something brushing against the other side of the drywall. Slow, like fingertips. Moving across it in a line. It stopped directly behind my headboard. I pulled the bed away from the wall that night and slept on the floor. The next day, I worked from a coffee shop across town. I couldn't be in the apartment. Not while the sun was out, not while that room still sat sealed next to mine. I opened my laptop and started searching for tenant reviews of the complex. Anything. But there was nothing about 7A. Just vague complaints about slow maintenance and outdated appliances. Until I found a post from 2 years ago. A thread on an old local forum. Anyone else ever hear stuff from the empty units at Ridgeview Courts? There were only 2 replies. The The first said it was probably homeless people sneaking into the supply closets. The second just said, if it's the one next to the courtyard, move. That night, I went back only because I didn't have anywhere else to go. I left the lights on. I wore headphones. I didn't sleep. At 4:12 a.m., my power went out.
No storm.
No warning. Just a sharp click, and the whole place went black. I tore the headphones off. Silence. Then footsteps. From the other side of the wall. Walking slowly, right along the length of it. I froze. My phone was at 8%. I didn't even think to text anyone. I just sat there in the dark, staring at the wall, willing it to be just drywall. Just empty space. Then I heard it. A knock. 3 sharp taps. From 7A. As if answering the ones I had made days ago. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Another knock. Then something even worse. A voice. Muffled low, barely more than a whisper, but I swear I heard it, "You're not alone." That was it. Just those 3 words. I stood up, barefoot, every nerve in my body firing, and went to the front door. I didn't grab anything. I didn't pack a bag. I just opened the door and stepped into the courtyard. The hallway lights were still on. 7's door was closed. The window still shuttered. But now, there were scuff marks on the floor. Black smudges. Fresh. I followed them with my eyes. They led from 7's door to mine. Back and forth. Back and forth. The next morning, the power was back. Everything looked normal again. My apartment, bright with morning light, didn't feel haunted. But I knew it was. I tried to tell myself I was imagining things. That I was overworked. Sleep deprived. But then I saw it. Someone had slid something under my door during the night. A photograph. Printed on glossy paper, curled at the edges. No words.
No markings.
Just an image. Me. Sleeping. In my bed. Taken from above.